This is the Week 7 tutorial on error correction. The purpose of this tutorial is twofold. First, we're going to talk about the general types of error patterns that can occur when we're using the systematic prompting systems that we've been talking about in class. And the second purpose is to give you some examples of what those errors might look like in practice. We're going to be talking about both long-term and short-term ways of dealing with these different types of errors, but we'll be doing that in class as it is a little more technical and students prefer, it's a bit more effective if we do that face-to-face. So before we begin, let's talk about error correction in general and what it is. Error correction is systematic procedures used to respond to student errors in order to minimize the development of error patterns in the student's performance. Just like we use prompts systematically, consistently over time, the same thing with responding to errors. We want to make sure that we're doing that systematically and consistently from error to error so that the student isn't having error patterns inadvertently reinforced or getting confused by a variety of responses that are occurring. So the first thing that we need to discuss is minimizing student errors. And remember, in class we've talked about stimulus prompting systems and non-stimulus prompting systems. Most errors actually can be minimized through the use of stimulus prompting procedures. Remember, those are systems in which the SD and the initial prompt that you're using to assist the student come at virtually the same time. So the ones that we've talked about are most to least prompts, graduated guidance, and progressive time delay, which I've told you starts as a stimulus prompting procedure and then moves to a non-stimulus prompting procedure. For the purpose of this discussion, it's grouped in the first category of stimulus prompting systems. So if we use these systems, students are not given the time to make an error because we're giving them prompts and heavy amounts of assistance right away. Because of this, these prompting procedures are often called errorless learning procedures, and they can minimize a good number of the errors that might occur. However, errors still do manage to occur, and there are 4 common types of errors that we're going to look at. They have very technical names, but when you break them down, they're pretty logical. So let's look at the names first. There is an unprompted no response error, there's an unprompted error, there's a prompted no response error, and a prompted error. And if you break these phrases down, the first half of the phrase has to do with what the teacher is doing, and the second half of the phrase has to do with what the student is doing. So there are 2 possible things that the teacher could be doing and 2 possible things that the student can be doing. The 2 possible things that the teacher could be doing is nothing, providing no assistance, and that's in the case of those errors that are listed as unprompted. No prompts are being given. The second thing that a teacher could be doing is prompting, hence the name prompted error. So those 2 error types you see 3 and 4 are errors that occur when a teacher is providing a prompt. Okay? So the first 2 errors are when the teacher is doing nothing, no prompts, and the second 2 types of errors are when the teacher is prompting. Conversely, there are 2 things that a student can do: either respond incorrectly or not respond at all, and that's what those second phrases in the types of errors are. That's what those mean. So in the case of the first and third error type, no response is occurring. The student's doing nothing, not responding at all. And in the case of the second and fourth type of error, the student is responding, but responding incorrectly. Okay? So I'm going to read these error types again, and I'm going to use layman's terms to tell you what they mean. So the first error type is teacher does nothing, student does nothing. The second type is teacher does nothing, student does it wrong. The third error type is teacher provides a prompt, student does nothing. And the fourth type of error is teacher provides a prompt and the student does it wrong. That's essentially what all those technical words are saying. So you'll see it's pretty self-explanatory. So let's turn to the first error type, unprompted no response error. This is when the discriminative stimulus is presented, no prompts are given by the teacher, and the student doesn't respond, doesn't do anything. This is most likely to occur with least to most prompts, a constant time delay, or a progressive time delay after the delay has been extended from 0 seconds, after it's shifted over to a non-stimulus prompting system. And you will see this across all of the error types that we're going to discuss. As a rule of thumb, the errors are most likely to occur in non-stimulus prompting systems, as a rule. Although they can occur in the other ones, they're generally when non-stimulus prompting procedures are used. Not that those are bad, not that they don't have their place, but that is a big disadvantage of them. So just keep that in mind. So let's look at an example of an unprompted no response error. In this case, a student's presented with a sight word flashcard that says exit. So we want her to read that sight word. But she looks at the word and she says nothing. So in this case, the teacher is not prompting and the student's not doing anything. And her error is that she didn't read the card at all. So let's look at the second error type. The second error type is an unprompted error, or in layman's terms, teacher does nothing, student responds wrong. Okay? The description is just what I said. When the discriminative stimulus is presented and the teacher is not prompting, the student responds incorrectly. And again, these most likely occur when non-stimulus prompting systems are used. So an example of this would be the student is presented with this sight word flashcard that we've been looking at. It says exit, and the student looks at the word, teacher's not prompting, student looks at the word and says entrance. So teacher doesn't do anything to prompt or assist, but the student does the behavior incorrectly. The third error type is a prompted no response error. Layman's terms, teacher does something to assist, but the student doesn't do anything to answer. So again, the description, when the discriminative stimulus and the subsequent prompts are presented, the student does not respond. Again, most likely to occur in a non-stimulus prompting system. An example of this, keeping with our same line of thought with the flashcard, the student is presented with a sight word flashcard saying exit. The teacher is using a constant time delay. So we talked about this in class. A constant time delay is when you have one prompt that you're using that should get the job done. It's called the controlling prompt, and we're going to discuss this in more detail. But you're waiting a certain amount of time, and you're always waiting the same amount of time before you're giving that prompt. So here the teacher's using a constant time delay. She's waiting 5 seconds. That's the amount of time she's waiting. And then she's going to give a pictorial prompt with an exit, a card having a picture of an exit sign on it. So the teacher shows the flashcard, waits 5 seconds, shows the student the picture, and the student still doesn't say anything. That is a prompted no response error. The final error type is a prompted error. In layman's terms, teacher does something to assist, prompts to assist, student does it wrong. Okay? So the discriminative stimulus and the subsequent prompts are presented and the student responds incorrectly. Again, to reiterate, it occurs, non-stimulus prompting systems are used. So the example would be the student's presented with a sight word flashcard. It says exit. The teacher again is using that constant time delay, so that pictorial prompt is going to be used after the 5 seconds of waiting occurs. So the student's presented with the card, teacher waits 5 seconds, presents the pictorial prompt, and the student responds by saying entrance. So she's responding incorrectly. So we've just talked about the major types of errors, and I've given you examples of each. In class, we're going to talk about responding to these errors. Again, as I said in the beginning, it's a more technical topic that we need to do in a more face-to-face manner. But just to give you a preview, when you respond to these kinds of errors, there are 2 levels of thought that you need to make sure that you're addressing. And the first level of thought is, what do I do now, in this moment, in this trial, when this error is happening? That's the first thing you need to think about. And then the second line of thought that you need to keep in mind is, what do I do if the same error occurs over and over across time? How do I change my instruction so that doesn't happen? So that's what we're going to be discussing in detail in class. So now that you've completed the tutorial, you can go ahead and click on the link to the quiz. You'll get a PDF that you print, and then you fill it out and bring it to class. and we'll discuss it, and we will also do some additional things with the quiz to make sure that you bring your answers. And that concludes this tutorial.